All right, I have with me here. What is your name, sir?
My name is Max.
Max, and you are not born in the United States. Which country you were
I'm
born?
originally from Russia, from Moscow.
From Moscow, Russia. Okay. So, how old were you initially when you came to the United
The
States?
first time I was 6 years old.
Okay. And what was the circumstance for your coming to the United States, or your parents bringing you?
My father came to study in seminary
Oh.
in the United States, in Dallas
Okay.
Theological Seminary.
Okay.
And it was still the Soviet Union back then, so there was no place to do that.
Okay.
So we had to come to the States.
And you were here just for the duration of his studies?
Yes.
So you
4
went
years.
so after 4 years, you went back to
Yes.
Russia, and then you came again at what age?
I believe I was 14 years old again when
Okay.
we came the second time. We came to Pasadena, California. My dad was accepted to a PhD program in
Okay.
Fuller Seminary.
So what was your initial legal status then, or how was it attained?
It's dependent of a student, which
Okay.
is an F2 visa.
That was on your dad, correct?
My dad had an F1 visa,
Okay.
and I had an F2, which
So-
is a dependent.
Okay, got it. So from an F2, then you had to get a new status or a new visa?
So in the time that we were in the country, I finished high school and applied to college, and I was
Okay.
accepted at an American college, and I received a scholarship in a school in Michigan, and I applied and got my own F1 visa as
Okay.
a student.
I see. So F1s you're able to achieve because you've achieved that scholarship, you were accepted.
Because you've been accepted to study in an American
Okay,
university.
got it. So as an F1, so that will only last for the...
For the duration of your study.
Okay, so when you get your degree, what happened next?
When you get your degree, you have what's called an optional practical training, and that is a 1-year permission to find work and legally work in this country.
Okay.
And if you want to stay for longer than that and work in this country, you have to apply and be granted an H-1B
Okay.
working visa.
And okay.
Which in the year when I applied, so I graduated class of 2007 from my college.
Yes.
And it took me, in that year, it took me about 9 months to find my first job.
Wow. So there's pressure. If you don't get it by that year, you have to go.
You have to find your first job, yes.
So
Otherwise you have
I want to
go.
follow that really quick. So you're a Russian citizen, essentially,
Yes.
with legal residency. But after a year, if you couldn't find a job, you would essentially have to go back to Russia? Is that
Absolutely.
correct? Wow. So nobody gives you a sob story about separated families
No.
or whatever.
And,
The law's the law, right?
I was familiar with most of the international students at the college, and I would say all of them had a dream to stay in this country once they finished their degrees, and most of them ended up going back because they couldn't find work.
And we don't hear their sob stories.
It
They
was-
didn't cry and whine. They just accepted it.
They just accepted the reality of the circumstances.
Did it happen that maybe their parents were here, but they had to go, or vice versa?
I don't know those kind of details.
That's
but
fine. But
I think most of them were just studying here, and the parents were back home. Yeah.
Okay. So you achieved the H-1B, and H-1B is a working visa?
When I applied for an H-1B visa back in 2008, there was a lottery for it. So there were half as many available spots as people who applied.
Okay.
So it was essentially like rolling the dice, 50-50. I found a job. I found an employer who was willing to sponsor me, but it wouldn't matter if the government didn't approve your visa.
So it was completely
In
dependent
that
on the government?
Entirely.
Okay. And I'm just saying again, you didn't riot in the streets or throw a fit. It was just you accepted the situation. And all this time, you could have been told to go back to Russia.
Yes.
After having lived in the country for, at that point, it would have been what?
Would have been 9 years.
So even if you'd been here for 9 years, you would have been told to go back to Russia.
Yes.
Wow. I forgot to ask. F1, F2, H1B. Do you have to pay fees for that? Did you have to pay for that?
Yes, absolutely. Every filing you make with visas, and especially H1B, it's hard for me to remember, but it's several $1,000s, and more on top of that in lawyer fees, almost just as much.
So you have to get a lawyer to help you.
There's too much paperwork, and it's
now,
too
isn't that
complicated.
interesting? You had to pay for a lawyer.
I had to pay for it out of my salary.
I'm going to be asking you this question from time to time, but how does it make you feel when you have a large number of these illegal aliens in this country and they get free legal help? What's your thought on that?
I never received any free help, and I wish them luck with their filings, but I never received that kind of help. I wish I had some kind of free legal help, because I was barely making ends meet for almost the entirety of my stay. And
you have to take the money out of your hide, essentially, to do it. Yes. Nobody gave you a grant or anything?
I was living month to month in this country.
Oh my God.
You know, barely paying my own rent.
What was the job you worked? What was the job you worked?
I was the tax accountant.
Okay, you were an accountant, so that's a very high level, that's a very profound career. So this H-1B, it has to be renewed?
It has to be renewed every 3 years, and you can keep renewing it indefinitely.
Okay. And there's a cost to renew?
Every 3 years when you renew, you have to pay thousands of dollars to the government and to the lawyers to make those filings.
Unbelievable. Right. And this is a new line of questioning I didn't think to ask, but what do you have to answer a questionnaire? Do you have to provide paper? What are some of the things you end up providing? What you can recall?
You have to give them your tax returns. You have to fill out documents. You have to provide W-2s to substantiate that you've been working in this country.
And I have to ask, heaven forbid, if you committed a crime, would that disqualify you or something? Do they look at a record to see that you haven't committed a crime?
I don't remember specifically, but there's so many questions on those forms that it wouldn't surprise me that there may be a question involved.
So isn't that interesting? You are thoroughly vetted. You are contributing to the community.
Yes.
You have a job. Someone saw your talent and hires you, and you're paying such a substantial amount to continue to stay legally. And you're not even a citizen under that. Now, you've gone beyond H-1B. What do you have now?
I have a green card now.
And that determines permanent status?
It's a permanent residency card. It simply allows you to live and work in this country and choose your employer.
Do you have to renew anything with that?
It has to be renewed every 10 years.
Okay, so you could make a mistake or something could slip and it could be revoked.
That would be scary, yes.
But it can happen.
Yeah, but I believe
So it's kind of funny. They call it a permanent record, but they're kind of pulling your chain. They technically, legally, the country can say, nope, we're taking it.
They could, as with any visa. Any visa can be.
And that's another cost every 10 years. Is that correct?
I'm sure it is, but
because you've just started it. You haven't had you'll be renewing it in another 7 years or 8 years. Is that correct?
Probably another 8 years. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a couple of years now.
Okay. Now, as a permanent resident, are you allowed to vote? Are you allowed to?
No.
Okay, so you don't have. You're not allowed. Do you get to serve on juries?
No, I do not.
Okay, so there's a lot of citizenship privileges you still can't enjoy.
No, but I still pay all the taxes that every citizen has to pay.
So how?
And I've been paying them ever since I started working in this country.
So let's start from when you came back the second time you were 10 or 14. So how long has it been from then to now?
It's been 18 years now.
So 18 years, it's taken you 18 to become a permanent resident.
Yes.
How much longer would it take to become a citizen?
It's 3 more years on the green card before you can apply for citizenship.
Okay, so there's a statutory minimum of 5 years, is that correct?
5 years, I think, on a green card before you apply for citizenship.
And is it true, can the federal government decide we're not going to give it to you? Because I don't know.
As with any application, they could probably decide to not grant it.
Okay. So now comes the big question.
You have to go through a test, you have to go through an interview. I've heard you have to do everything right. Pay the fees too, I bet.
That's right. So I like to say you have to pass all the tests, play by the rules, pay all the fees. I'd like to, does that sound about right? So it's been about 20 years you've done all of this. And this line of questioning builds to this question. What is your reaction to the 11, now maybe 16 to maybe 30 million illegal aliens in this country who are demanding amnesty, legal status, or even citizenship? What's your reaction to that?
I'm filled with rage when I see the possibility that somebody can be granted all the rights and all the privileges that I've worked so hard to get over so long a time, and it's a very difficult existence on a working visa. You have to worry every day about losing your job, because if you lose your job, you have a month to find a new one, or else you have to get out of the country, and it really has, it's shortened my lifespan, the experience going through the visa. And my sister as well, she had to go through that same process. And
is she in the same status as you are at this time, with a permanent status?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it frustrates me incredibly that somebody might be granted a green card while I had to put all of that time, all of those blood, tears, and treasure, the money I had to pay, the stress I had to go through. Because when somebody gets the status that I have and not have to work for it, that makes me look like a fool. I'm very frustrated by it.
Wow. Jeez Louise. And because you're from Russia, this comes to mind really quick. How would you compare the immigration laws here to Russia, if you're familiar with that system? I'm just asking. I'm kind of curious.
I've never been an immigrant to Russia. So
well, yeah. I mean, what? How do they? Do they have a wall? Do they?
From what I've
That's the line of interest I have.
They have a visa system now similar to America's. That it's not very easy to get into Russia. You have to have a letter of invitation from a Russian citizen.
Well, that's interesting.
You have to have an interview. You have to.
I guess I would say, do they have like DREAM Acts and DACA in Russia? Do they have programs to allow?
No.
That's what I should have been. That's the line of thinking I'm looking at. They don't accommodate illegals in the country, to the best of your knowledge.
Absolutely not. They would be unheard of. I've never seen an illegal immigrant protest in Moscow.
Wow.
Or any major Russian city.
That says a lot. Well, I want to say thank you for being a legal resident and following the rules. And I was talking to you privately, and I'm just astounded. There are things you inform me of that people are not aware of how difficult. And people hear the amount of time, years, but they don't understand the cost. They don't understand the stress, the risks, and the fact that you could be forced to leave
at any moment.
And let me guess, do you end up having to pay the cost of that ticket too?
Oh, absolutely.
You're on your own for that.
Costs,
in that scenario, I don't know what to think. If you can't pay for the ticket, what do they do? What happens? I'm just curious. I mean, do you know what happens to maybe some of your friends were in a situation?
The Russian government has offered at one point for any expatriates who want to come back, they offered to pay your return flight ticket.
Okay, so there's that. But would you want to go back to Russia?
No, not really. It's a country that's been devastated by years of communist mismanagement, and it's going to be recovering from that trauma for as long as I'm alive.
You bring something to my attention, this communism issue, and I'm going to divert a little bit. You have lived under communism. Yes. You saw the free market, the capitalism in this country. Let me stop this here, and I'll